Okay, so today I want to share with you one part of what I did for my field practicum. I want to talk about the importance of traditional charcoal production in Sierra de Zongolica, back in Mexico, but for young people. I want to talk a little bit about how this project was born. So my host organization is Centro de Investigaciones Tropicales. CITRO is an academic and interdisciplinary space for teaching and research, and their team members are specialized in natural sciences, social sciences, and ethnosciences. This CITRO is a partner of TCD since 2008. And we started this question, my field practicum, with this question on how to do research in the middle of a pandemic. Because, you know, we were not able to travel and I had to do something for my field practicum. So my advisor, Karen Kiner, she was kind enough to contact me with Citlali Lopez from CITRO. She has been working in Sierra de Zongolica, that is the area that in that black square. She has been working there for several years in different projects. And right now she's conducting some research in traditional charcoal production in this area. So she invited me to be part of this bigger project, and I could contribute to the project doing a literature review, but we also wanted to do something useful with information from the literature review. And we decided that we were going to create like a flip book with my main findings of the literature review to share it with young people in Sierra de Zongolica. I want to start talking about like charcoal. Around the world, more than 2.4 billion people rely on the traditional use of fuel wood for cooking. Around 50% of the wood extracted from forests around the world is used for fuel wood and charcoal, and around 70% is purchased by urban centers. But why has fuel wood remained as an important source of energy now that we have like other things to cook? Well, it doesn't require expensive equipment, is easy to use, and can be obtained at no greater cost than the labor of harvesting and preparing it. However, fuel wood has been considered as a driver of deforestation and forest degradation, but charcoal produced in agroforestry systems can be key for forest conservation. But what are agroforestry systems? Agroforestry systems are managed areas that integrate trees into agricultural landscapes. They lead to diversified and sustained production of different products like food crops, fuel wood, animal feed, construction materials, among others. There are a lot of benefits associated to agroforestry systems. They provide a broad array of ecosystem services like protection of watersheds. They can increase and protect local biodiversity, soil protection, carbon sequestration, and also they can help to reduce the pressure over natural areas for different resources. There are multiple economic benefits associated with these systems like food security, fuel wood availability, forage for livestock. They're a source of natural remedies like herbs. They require lower agricultural inputs, and they can contribute to create more resilient livelihoods. And they also constitute traditional land management techniques, and they contribute to the maintenance of knowledge about the complex interactions between agricultural, social, cultural, and cosmological systems. FAO divide agroforestry systems in three main types. The first one, agro-silvicultural systems. They combine trees and food crops. Silvopastoral systems, they combine like trees and livestock, and agro-silvopastoral systems, they combine food crops, livestock, and trees. Around the world, there's like this charcoal produced in a traditional way follows more or less this scheme. It has its variations in every place, but generally the wood is cut down for this purpose. Sometimes the trees used are the result of clearance of the land or other practices. So they cut down the trees or the branches. They cut them in the sizes that they wanted, that they consider are appropriate for building the kiln. They start piling the wood with this shape. And then they cover these with soil and sometimes grain branches. They have to make sure that the kiln is sealed so they can keep the heat and the combustion is is working in a proper way. After that, they turn the kiln on, and there's always someone there keeping an eye on it to be sure that the fire is on, that is the combustion is going like in the proper pace and different things. So as you can see, being a charcoal master, as they call them in Mexico, they have to have a lot of knowledge and a lot of skills. After that, when the charcoal is ready, they let it cool down, they remove the soil, and they have a final product like this. So now that I gave you like a big overview about charcoal production, I want to talk a little bit more about Sierra de Zongolica. That is the place where I work. Is located in central Veracruz. This is a mountainous area. It's full of mountains and they have like a wide range of altitude. It's integrated by 14 municipalities. It's dominated by a pine oak forest, and it's an heterogeneous landscape that is integrated by different agroforestry systems. Some of them have oaks and agriculture, other of them are agroforestry systems for coffee production and different things. And it's also considered a biocultural priority region. The biocultural regions are those areas in Mexico that are considered as centers with high biological, agroecologic, and cultural diversity, and are part of the identity of indigenous peoples and local communities. So the land tenure history in Sierra de Zongolica is really intricate, and it's really important to understand how, to understand the composition of Sierra de Zongolica. These forests have been under intensive management even before the Spanish conquest. During the colony and after the independence, the land was held by private owners. They were big properties that belonged to just one owner or one family. After the agrarian reform in the last century, the land was redistributed in small holder private property. So around 77% of the land in this area are small holding properties, something that is different from the tendency of other areas in Mexico that is communal property. 90% of the population recognizes as indigenous, and 85% speaks Nahuatl, that is an indigenous language. The Nahuatl from Zongolica are recognized as guardians of traditional ecological knowledge on how to manage the agroforestry systems and the forest in this area. However, this area is threatened by deforestation, mainly by land use change for agriculture, slash and burn agriculture, animal husbandry, and illegal logging. Something that I found in the literature is that people from this area recognize that the illegal loggers are from other regions or other states, and also is threatened by over-exploitation of forest resources. So the charcoal production in Sierra de Zongolica, this is the main charcoal producer in the state of Veracruz. In this region, the charcoal has the same destiny as in other parts of the country. It's sold mostly for urban households and street food like elotes, tamales, and other delicious things. Most of the as I mentioned, most of the charcoal is sold in urban centers of the state of Veracruz, but also in other states like Puebla, Tlaxcala, and Morelos, that are all the states that are neighbors of this region. Sorry, most of the households use firewood for cooking and heating, and charcoal is saved for commercialization. So charcoal is an important source of additional income for households in this part. Charcoal is produced of mainly 5 oak species. and follows more or less the cycle. It changes in some municipalities. But first, they harvest the oak trees. They harvest them between 10 and 15 years. After they cut the wood, they put it to dry and pile it in the kiln. They start the kiln, and when the charcoal is ready, they start preparing it to sell it. And meanwhile, they use the land for agricultural production while the oak sprouts grow. So when the oak sprouts have like certain height that they start like making some shade in the field, they stop producing crops. The charcoal commercialization in Zongolica is controlled by intermediaries. The cycle is more or less like that. As I said before, it varies in some cases. But first, the charcoal masters, the carboneros, when the charcoal is ready, they put them in sacks of 20 to 25 kilograms. Then they sell it to the collectors. Collectors, they go to different municipalities. They collect charcoal from different municipalities for different charcoal masters, or sometimes they buy it like on the roads. And they buy the charcoal in like these big sacks. And what they do is that they separate it in smaller bags of 2 or 5 kilograms. And then they sell it to external intermediaries that sometimes are like stores or stores in urban centers. And then they sell it to the final consumer. So the objectives, this is the general objective of my field practicum, was to highlight the role of traditional management practices of charcoal production in agroforestry systems. And the specific objective for this part was to create a flipbook about traditional charcoal production in agroforestry systems around the world. And I wanted to evaluate and discuss the content of this flipbook with people from the region to make it more interesting, more attractive, and more appropriate for the reality of Zongolica. And other thing that I wanted to do was to start a conversation about traditional charcoal production to highlight the importance of this activity in the community. So first, I decided to set up a discussion group to evaluate the content of the flipbook. But the first question that I faced was, how can I recruit participants in a place that I have never been? So what I did is I used the network of Citlali's network. She was kind enough to introduce me to Carolina Lizondo. She's a teacher in a local college, Instituto Tecnológico Superior de Zongolica. And she offered me that I could, work with the students over there, that some of them already had like some experience or with charcoal, or, that they know a little bit about it. So I even created a flyer. She was really nice and distributed with the students. And then the second part was how to facilitate and set a discussion group over Zoom that was engaging, that give the students the space to participate, how to ensure that everyone will be heard, and how to build trust with these students that they have never seen me, they didn't know me. So I was a stranger that studying someplace far, that wanted to know more about charcoal in Zongolica. So I faced these questions and I didn't know how to do it, but I was able to overcome this. At the end, I had 8 students from different semesters of forest engineering, as I mentioned, in Instituto Tecnológico Superior de Zongolica. And this activity, it was 2 hours total. The questions that guided the inquiry of the discussion group was, I wanted to know what they think about the flipbook content, what they would like to see in the flipbook, what was their response or reaction to learn about agroforestry systems in other regions in the world, and what was their perception of traditional charcoal production in the region. So I started my discussion group really nervous, and I reminded them that this was an open space for participation and all ideas were welcome. I shared with them the agenda of the day, the objectives, and I wanted them to know a little bit more about me. So I present myself, and then I wanted to know them. So I start with an icebreaker activity. I ask their name, where are they from, and if they could mention their favorite tree. I use the favorite tree because they are forestry students, so it's something that they talk like on daily basis. Then I did a little presentation of the flipbook. I did a power presentation. I present them with the structure that was like an introduction of charcoal, a brief overview about traditional charcoal production in agroforestry systems around the world. I also presented like specific cases like charcoal production in Brazil or in some agroforestry systems in Europe, so they could see that, so they could see like examples, you know. After that, I also talk a little bit about the characteristics of the wood to produce high quality charcoal. I talk about a management technique that the name is copies, and like the importance for charcoal production. I give them like definition and some like guidelines on how to do it. And also like, then we have the conclusions. After that, I separate them into breadcrumbs, because I want them to have the space, you know, to discuss about my work without me being there. I ask them to mention 3 things they like, 3 things they think that I can improve, and 3 things they would like to see added. So I gave them 20 minutes to discuss it, and I asked them to, you know, to designate one person to share the things that they discussed. And after that, I asked them, what do they know about charcoal production in Sierra de Zongolica? I asked them to do like a brainstorm activity. And I also wanted to know, you know, how can we relate the content of the flipbook, what I presented, with Zongolica's reality? So my results, all the students are from Veracruz, but just half of them belong to Sierra de Zongolica. And something that I found really interesting about their favorite trees is that they mention 4 species that are present in Sierra de Zongolica that are oaks, abies, this magnolia that the common name is Yolosochitl, and this cupressus that the common name is Tlaxca. And then they mention other species that there are not present in Sierra de Zongolica but are common in the state of Veracruz, that are liquidambar and this jinicuil that is a tree from the genus Inga, and this has like these edible fruits and it's like really popular over there. Then when I asked about like the evaluation of the flipbook when they presented the results, the things that they liked was to see the overview about agroforestry systems and charcoal production, the importance of agroforestry, the presentation of different cases of the world, around the world, the introduction to this technique called copies, and knowing different tree species used for charcoal production. When I asked them the things to be improved was the lack of information on how charcoal is processed in the cases that I presented. They wanted to know more species that can be used for charcoal production. And they also want me to include images that illustrate the process to make the flipbook more attractive. Also, they want me to use less concepts and more user-friendly language, you know, less jargon, something that we in academia, we have this tendency to do. And the things that they would like to see to be added, they wanted to see a brief description of methods to produce charcoal, production in US dollars in different parts of the world, you know, like how much income charcoal production gives in other parts. And also include an overview of charcoal production in Mexico, an overview of the markets, the policy, all species used in other parts of the country, diversity of agroforestry systems, and different production methods. Then I asked them to do this brainstorm of what they know about charcoal production. I knew that some of them have like previous knowledge or certain relationship with it, but not all of them were like experts. So that's why I wanted to do it in a brainstorm style. They mentioned the ecological impact of charcoal production. They recognize charcoal as a driver of deforestation. And also they say that there's an increasing pressure over natural forests to obtain wood for charcoal. The communities that produce charcoal that they know are Atzompa, Tequila, Tlaquilpa, Tehuacan, and Mixtla. A couple of these localities, especially Tequila and Atzompa, are recognized as charcoal communities that are charcoal producers for a really long time. They also mentioned that the 3 species used for charcoal are encinos, that are oaks, 2 oaks species, and also pine. Some of them mentioned that the production of charcoal in this area is unauthorized. The people over there, they don't have the permits to do it. There's a lack of interest from younger generations to learn how to produce charcoal or to be involved in the charcoal business. There's an increasing demand for charcoal from urban centers. This is like a tendency that we have seen before, but something that they mention is that now bigger towns that are smaller than cities are starting to demand more charcoal, especially for street food. They also say that the price of the product is really low. They mentioned that 1 kilogram is 7 Mexican pesos. That is more or less the equivalent in US dollars are 35 cents. So it's really low. They also mentioned that a lot of families that used to produce charcoal, they stopped doing that because it didn't pay off. So they needed to abandon this activity to start a new one to be able, to generate income for the household. And they mentioned the importance of traditional ecological knowledge and that the knowledge of charcoal production and agroforestry systems is transmitted generation by generation. So if you want to learn, you need to get closer with someone that does it, and they will be able to teach you how to do it. And then this is the part that for me was the most interesting and the most fun. I asked them what was their relationship with charcoal after they share what they know. But then I asked about the relationship. And at the beginning, they didn't recognize that they have one. Like they didn't know how charcoal like fits on the community. And I gave them some minutes to think about it. And then a participant shared that she said that my dad used to work producing charcoal. This was as a complementary source of income. He has another job, but he doesn't anymore. He didn't mention when, she just said this. And then another participant said that my mom has a store and she buys charcoal from people of the community to resell the charcoal in the store. So this is interesting because she's getting the charcoal from the main producer instead of an intermediary. And after some minutes of silence, other participants started to share their indirect relationship with this resource. So some of them, started to have a relationship with charcoal after a field trip where they went to a pine plantation and they learned that in that place they produce charcoal from pine. They show them how to, how the kilns are built and how to take care of them. So in that point, that's where the relationship started. Other people, their interest was to study charcoal. They wanted to learn more because they saw that it's an activity that is really common over there. Or some of them know neighbors or family members that produce charcoal or used to produce charcoal in some point of their lives. So this activity was more common than they thought. And at the end, they recognized the importance of this activity and how in one way or another they were related to charcoal. I'm really excited that they say that the importance is not just economic. You know, that charcoal has like a social component and is part of the community dynamic, and also is part of their cultural identity. So the conclusions is that the creation of outreach materials that recognizing the importance of these systems and the process, how they created, can contribute for their appreciation. So when I presented these cases from around the world, and when I presented that charcoal is produced is a common practice around the world, the students were really excited to see that. In some point, they thought that charcoal production in Sierra de Zongolica was something that was kind of isolated and was like just from that region. But they found really exciting and interesting that it's something that is happening all over the world. And so they start like taking value on that is something that is happening in other parts, not just in Zongolica. They also, as I mentioned before, recognize the importance of charcoal production, but not just the economic value of it, the social and the cultural value that it has for the community in Sierra de Zongolica. And it's important to make visible the value of the skills and knowledge from rural communities regarding traditional landscapes and charcoal production. So when we start talking about this, and when the students realize all the set of skills and knowledge that charcoal producers have, they start like, you know, taking pride on that. Like there's people that know a lot about charcoal and they're doing this job that is labor intensive, and they took pride on that. And for me, it's something that is really important for them, because now charcoal is not, you know, something that is happening over there. It's something that has more value. So my takeaways on facilitating over Zoom, I found really useful. Use the breakout rooms to allow discussion. As I mentioned before, it gave them the space to talk between them, and they already know each other. They already have trust, and they didn't have me over there, and they didn't have to criticize my work to my face, that sometimes in some places in Mexico, it can be considered rude to do it. So I allow them to have their own space to do it without me being there. And also use different activities, not just, you know, like the boring PowerPoint. Use some discussion, presentations, brainstorm. Now there are a lot of tools that you can use, like Jamboard, Google Docs, and there's a lot of things, online resources that we can use, and we don't need to spend like these 2 hours speaking in order to get information. We can use these different activities and resources, and we can still get a lot of information from them. Also provide documents with instructions and questions. I use Google Docs for this. It was really useful because they could go back and see, you know, what they were supposed to do, and they could make notes over there. Even if I have, you know, the recording of the group, I also have their notes. So that is like really, really useful for me. Also give examples when they were talking about, when I asked them about the relationship about charcoal. I feel that at the beginning, they were kind of shy because they felt that I know more than them, when in reality, probably they know more than me about charcoal production in Zongolica. So after these people share the comments that their parents were related with charcoal in some way, I share with them, you know, that I was born and raised in the city, and before starting the MDP, I didn't have a direct relationship with charcoal, but after that, it kept my interest, and now like I learned a lot from it, and I wanted to share what I learned from it with them, but I also wanted to learn from them. And something really important, that silence is not necessarily uncomfortable. Sometimes we need to give people time for them to, you know, think and process the questions that we are asking, or we need to give them time to elaborate their ideas. Sometimes this is something that sometimes I struggle with this because I am an extrovert and I want to keep talking all the time. But silence doesn't have to be like that. Silence sometimes is necessary to allow people to, you know, to start their thought process and elaborate their ideas, and allows them to participate. And right now, like I'm almost over, but I want you to think about this and share with me and start the discussion. And if you have used online platform for your research now in these times that were like really challenging, and we cannot like, you know, have groups of people, and we had to be really resilient and creative. And I want to hear more about like your experiences doing research like online and abroad. I want to thank my advisor, Karen Kainer, for all her help and contacting me with Citlali Lopez in Citro. I also want to thank Glenn Galloway. He was part of my committee. Again, I want to thank Citlali Lopez for giving me the chance to participate in this project. And also Carolina Elizondo. She was my contact in Tecnológico de Zongolica. She was really helpful. She helped me to contact some participants, to arrange the meeting. So she was awesome. I also want to thank the participants of the discussion group. I want to thank the MDP and the Center for Latin American Studies for the funds they provided, and also the support during home education. And last but not least, the Instituto Tecnológico Superior de Zongolica, that they gave me the chance and they allowed me to talk with their students and have this activity. So thank you for your time. And now I want to open the room for questions or comments, or if you want to share your experience doing research online.